Welcome to today's episode of the Simply Financial Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. Want to increase your financial IQ with today's episode? I have a special guest, Marshall Rosen of Creative Financial Network. Those of you that know me, clients of Elliott Wealth Management, know by now, or should know by now, that Elliott Wealth is merging into Creative Financial Network, and Marshall has been my primary counterpart through the entire process. This was formally executed on January 1st, but we've been working on it for months now, and we've worked very closely together. It has been an awesome experience. We've had a lot to do, but it's been very professional, always cordial. Marshall, I've come to know as kind man, very professional, super smart, and Creative Financial Network is a great organization. That's why I think my team and I and my clients are going to be so happy with the merger. I wanted to have Marshall on the show today just to talk a little bit about him, his background, where he came from. So I got some good questions for him. We'll interrogate him a little bit. No, not really. But Marshall, I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been quite a learning experience working with you the last 4 months, and it's not often you can say that you can go through a process like this and have no real disagreements.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been joking with people, including when we had dinner not too long ago. We've known each other 4 months or so, like you said, and I feel like I've known you for much, much longer. So to get listeners to know you a little bit, let's start with how long have you been a financial advisor? Just to tease you, I know you have a few years on me. So how long have you been a financial advisor?
In January, it'll be 38 years.
Very impressive.
And most of that was with 37 of that was with 2 firms.
Yes. And we're going to get into this. I know your early career, your foundational years early on were in the traditional life insurance business. We'll talk some about that. But I just want to go back to kind of the early years. I'm always kind of curious about what kind of household you grew up in, because early memories of money, how families dealt with money, handled money, I think frames a lot of what comes after. There's not an automatic, Marshall, that if you grew up in a rich family, you're going to think this way, or a poor family, you're going to think that way. But I do feel like it's a great framing exercise. So when you think about the family you grew up, your home you grew up in, rich, poor, middle class, how would you characterize it?
I'd say wealthy. My dad was a surgeon, and back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they did very well. And we lived in a really nice neighborhood, but I always felt I was the poorest in our neighborhood because there was some very wealthy people, but instilled some really unique values in me, in that money doesn't make happiness. Lack of money can make unhappiness, but you have to work for what you're going to get.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think about it when I talk with clients, the way I kind of set it up philosophically is that, money gives you optionality, gives you flexibility, it gives you choices. The lack of money limits choices oftentimes, and that is divorced from happiness. I don't think money makes you happy. You and I have both met people that are very financially well off and are miserable people that you don't want to hang around with. And I've met a number of people that have not necessarily won with money consistently, but they are marvelous people and people you want to hang around with and people you respect. So I agree with you about happiness. I like the building wealth so that you have options and flexibility and choices. I think that's a good goal.
I agree totally.
So you grew up in a, fairly well-off family. You already touched a little bit about it. What are some of the early memories of what you learned about money growing up, and who do you think you kind of learned the most from in the early years? I say early years, teenage years into the early college years, early memories about what you learned about money, and who do you think influenced you?
Well, I'm going to say my parents influenced me the most. And, their philosophy was they would support me in everything I needed. However, I was going to support myself in everything I wanted.
Oh,
So
I
when I
like that.
wanted my car at 17, first they let me tap into my bar mitzvah money. But I started working at 16 and I paid for my own car, my dad brought me down to the bank. Back in those days, they had the passbook loans and let me borrow
Yeah,
my own money at 1% above what I was getting,
yeah,
just to build credit and build responsibility and make payments. And it's funny now, but my first car was a Pinto. It was things that used to blow up all the time. But that was my first real purchase at 17, and I did it 100% on my own, and learned a lot.
yeah. So you essentially, out of college, began a career in financial services, as we talked about at the top of the discussion. Went to work for a life insurance company. So, what company was it?
I started off my first year in business with Prudential, and I found out it was the right business run company. And at 11 months in, I moved over to MetLife, where I then spent 32 years.
All right. 32 years. That's a pretty impressive run. Thinking about, again, early years, you're in the business world trying to figure out the industry, being a professional, building a career. Can you cite any of the advice you might have gotten early on at Prudential, or maybe when you jumped over to MetLife, that has stood the test of time given your long and very successful career?
One of the most important lessons I learned was always do what's right for the client first. Don't do what pays me the most. And the relationships you build will far give me a lot greater income in the long run than
Right.
the big hits up front. I have
Yeah.
clients that I worked with for 5, 10, 15 years before I actually made a sale because I did what was right for them. And one of them right now is actually my largest client ever. It was 15 years before I actually placed a product that paid me something with him.
Wow, that is impressive. And I agree with you. I know the industry has changed. Next in May of 2024, I will be in the business 32 years. And I know the compensation schedule, how we get paid has changed over time. And I think that's all natural and good. And we could debate all of that. But generally, I have found that most advisors, not all, but most advisors, they do a pretty good job of putting the needs of their clients first. I think the bad actors who do exist and should be dealt harshly, in my opinion, regulatory wise, they kind of ruin it for everyone else. But playing the long game with clients and building long-term successful business relationships and protecting your reputation and your view as a professional, your perception as a professional is so important. And I think it's a key to my success over time. I think most advisors fall into that category. I think sometimes the press gives us our industry a little bit of a bad name because of some of the bad actors.
It only takes one bad person, a bad story to taint us all. It's just
Yeah.
we have to be very, very careful. And um, I have zero tolerance for anybody doing anything shady in our organization.
Yes.
And I make that very clear up front. Always
Absolutely.
clients first.
Yes. So you've had a successful career in financial services, as we've talked about. And I know for me, it has been a great career. It's the only career I've known. It has been the fulfillment of my career goals, and the success that I've been blessed to have achieved is really something I take a lot of pride in. There's a lot to like about this industry. Like anything, though, I mean, it's not easy. There's friction, there's pressures, there's things I don't like. But can you talk a little bit about your views on what some of your favorite parts are of the career we have in financial services?
I have two major things that I really, really enjoy. First is helping a client achieve their goals, specifically, it is usually retirement. And I keep a collection of pictures of my clients, like they'll take the day they retire.
Yeah.
Oh, and the very fact that they were able to achieve their goals and leave work and enjoy the life afterwards because it's a new chapter, I get a lot of enjoyment. And then they send me pictures as they travel, as they help their grandchildren or build their vacation home, or whatever it is. I really cherish those pictures. The other one is a little bit more morbid, but I started off in the life insurance industry, and the industry is based on protecting those you love. And unfortunately, there were some early deaths, and I had to deliver a check to a widow at 22 with a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old.
Wow.
And I mean, they had nothing. They had just gotten out of the army. I mean, if they had $500 in the checking account, I'd be surprised. And I delivered a check for $250,000 on a policy I wrote 72 hours before he died.
Wow.
And she took the check, said thank you. I offered to help her invest it. She goes, no, thank you. I'm okay. And she came back 4 weeks later. She said, please, I need help. I said, all right, what's the problem? It's only been 4 weeks. She said, well, you seem to get a lot of friends when they know you have money. And my family already borrowed $50,000 that I know I'm getting back, and it's 200,000 I've left. That's it for my babies.
Yeah.
I took that money and invested it with her. I taught her how to get a car loan, a mortgage, buy a house. We, clothed the kids. We set up an education fund, and raised those kids. It was very satisfying to me.
Sure. I could totally see that. I agree. One of the great parts of the industry is being able to help people. We don't save lives like your dad being a surgeon or first responders, military, police, fire, and so on. But we do important work. I think the help we provide to clients is noble, and I take a lot of pride in that. I'll also add, I get tremendous enjoyment, and I know you do too, because we've talked about this off air. It's just getting to know all kinds of different people with different backgrounds and work experiences, entrepreneurs, people that grow through the corporate ranks, talking about people where they get knocked around by life, talking to retirees about their careers. I mean, it's really terrific to get to know people in a fairly intimate way because money is a key topic. We're all pursuing the almighty dollar to some degree. So getting to know people is fascinating and intriguing, and it's such a rich experience.
It is, and everyone has a different goal and a different perception. And part of our job, yours and mine, is to relate to what's important to them as opposed to what's important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well
I've
said.
learned that I've modified the definition of retirement planning so many times, but I've really come up with the ability to retire, not the necessity to retire.
Sure.
Because I've got so many people that I'll give them a call and say, we hit our goals and you can retire now. And they say, well, I love what I do. I want to work another 5 years, about 10 years. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But the stress is
Yeah.
off. The day it turns to not be fun, you can
Yeah.
say goodbye.
Yes. Yeah, that's the optionality that I touched on. We touched on earlier is, hey, if you get to any age and you say, I could retire if I want to, but I want to keep working, great. That you only have one life to live. It's your own personal journey. That's what you want to do. That's great. I often cite Warren Buffett, who I think is 89 or something like that. He still works. That's great for him. The worst case scenario and what we want to help people do in our profession is that you get to a certain age, say 65 as an example, and you can't retire and you are at the mercy of your employer, and you could have a problem if you have a health setback, because then you don't have good options and you don't have flexibility, and you could be trapped and could be put in financial harm's way. And I think that's a great way to look at it.
Especially sometimes people are forced to retire involuntarily with a
Sure.
job elimination or a health problem, and they're just not prepared. And it's a really enjoyable part of our business when you help them prepare, whether it's with saving enough money, with having the life insurance, having the disability insurance, having a plan. So when the unexpected comes up, you can deal with it and life goes on.
Yes, exactly. Uh, you have a designation. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm familiar with that designation. You have one, I believe it's relative to life insurance in particular. It's LUTCF. Can you talk a
Right.
little bit about that? How long have you had it? What does it stand for?
It stands for Life Underwriter Training Council Fellowship. So it's really the first set of courses you take when you come in the life insurance business, and it was very instrumental to me because when I took my first class, it was 5 classes, and I decided to leave Prudential rather abruptly a couple weeks before the class ended, and I went in to resign from the class. I thought I was leaving the business. And the instructor said, "Why are you leaving the class?" And I said, "Well, because I'm out of the business." And she said, "Why are you out of the business?" I said, "Well, I found out this company wasn't the place to be." And she said, "Let me introduce you to this other company called MetLife." And I was 25 years old, a kid. I didn't even know who that was. She said, "Is that a big
Yeah.
company?" And it was the biggest company in the world. And I started working there 3 weeks later and stayed in that class and finished it. But it taught me the real basics of how to communicate with a client, how to establish the needs, how to make sure the beneficiary arrangements are proper, just the real basics, but it follows you forever.
Good.
And I've taken many, many courses since then. You mentioned you're a certified financial planner. I actually taught every one of those classes.
Uh,
And through a snafu, I was supposed to get credit when I taught them, and through a snafu, I didn't get credit, so therefore I never took that final major test to get the designation. But essentially, I have all the knowledge since I taught every one of
oh,
those
I'm sure.
classes.
I'm sure. So,
And,
oh God, I'm sorry.
and it just taught me a real lot of things because you need to learn a certain amount in taking the class, but to teach the class, you have to learn even more.
Oh
Because
yeah.
you got to anticipate your questions in class. And, that old calculator that we use, that old 12C,
Oh my God, my best friend, the HP 12C.
and, the investment class is half the classes were really on how to use that calculator. And I had to become a master in it. And what I'm holding, I got like around 1990. So this thing's, 30 years old. Still kicking. 3 batteries later, but still kicking.
Yes. So you talked about knowledge a moment ago. Let's talk a little bit about your skill set. I know you wear a number of different hats. You're in a leadership position in the organization. You have partners, obviously involved in mergers, because you and I have worked on this project closely together. You have your own group of clients that you service at a very high level. I know you also act as a mentor to many young advisors in the organization and probably did the same thing at MetLife. Um, so you wear a lot of different hats. You're good at a lot of different things. But if you had to really distill it down to a couple of your best skills as a financial advisor, what would you talk about?
I think one of the most important is communicating with the clients and helping them articulate what's important to them. Okay. And I say, what's important about money to you, but what's important to life to you? Because it's two separate things. And helping them, I guess, again, articulate their goals so I know what I'm really trying to plan for and help them achieve those goals. That's one. And then walking that tight balance between persistent
Oh yeah.
and bugging people.
Oh yeah. Oh,
And I like to tell people that, Chris, if you tell me it's important that you start this plan, I am going to continue to call you to get this thing going. But at any time you tell me, hey, lay off, stop calling me, I'll stop. But until you
sure.
tell me to lay off, once you tell me it's important, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to put it on my calendar week after week after week. to get you to start doing it until you tell me it's not important. So that's a tightrope that I think I've gotten pretty good at. It's interesting. I've been married for 6 years with my wife, 14 years. In the beginning, she grew up in a family that didn't talk about money. I mean, not at all.
Yeah.
And, I could be at a party and, hey, I'm Marshall. I'm a financial planner. What do you do? And what's your important money goals? And she just want to crawl into the sofa. And to me, it's just natural.
Yeah. Uh, what about wealth building rules? We talked about some of your early memories earlier in the conversation. So as a financial planner, what are some of your bedrock sort of wealth planning, wealth building rules that you want to express to clients and are kind of central to the work you do helping
Well,
clients?
one thing I always speak about is spend cycles, spend circles. And, you take client A who receives their money and pays all their bills. And if there's anything left over, they save it. And they're always going to have less money than the client who receives the same amount of money, but saves first. And it could be $5, $10, $100 pay period, whatever it is, and then pays the bills after, because all the bills are still going to get paid, but
Sure.
they're going to pay themselves first. So pay yourself first. That's a very important principle. And I've instilled it to my kids. My grandchildren are 1 and 3, and they've already got their investment accounts. And yes,
Nice.
put money in there, and it's $6,000 and $7,000. But my daughter would ask me, like, "What do you intend to do here?" And I said, I'd like to put a few $1,000s a year in." But she got amazed when I showed her the compounding of just that little money, that college can be completely paid for in 21 years or 20 years when they go to school. I told her, you keep saving, because you can't guarantee that I'll do it, but if we both do it, they'll get a college education and maybe a down payment on a home.
Yeah, I love it. All right, cool. Anything else?
Um, you, you need to learn to roll with the punches, because things change. Tax laws change, the market changes, your job changes, your spending changes. You never know when you're gonna have to take care of a parent, and that throws your budget out. But you need to adjust and communicate, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And communicate, communicate, and communicate.
Yeah, I like that. I think I'll throw one out. I imagine we agree on this. I like to talk to people about being intentional with money, being purposeful. We've already covered how everybody's on their own journey, they're individual, they have their own personal goals. And there's a lot of ways to be successful, and you could even define success differently in terms of money or just about anything else for that matter. But with money, just be intentional and purposeful. People don't have success with money typically on accident. I'm sure there's exceptions, like you win lotto or get an unexpected inheritance. But generally speaking, if you're going to win with money, there has to be some intentionality, some purposefulness of what you're doing with your money. And people that are completely out of control, and there are lots of people that fall into this category where they're running up credit cards and they have cars they can't afford, and they're just out of control. They're not likely to be successful in building wealth, especially over the long term. So I like to talk about that intentionality, the purposefulness of what you're going to do with your money.
I agree. And you brought up an important point. You got to watch the interest. Only interest I've paid in the last 5 years is my mortgage interest. I
Yeah.
haven't paid $1 on a credit card. I never take, even those 0% offers. I never take those. I just don't want it. I don't want to be a slave to my money.
Yes. You need to be careful. You need to be careful with debt for sure. So 2 final questions before we finish up, Marshall. A little on the personal side again. Want to give people a little bit of a glimpse into Marshall Rosen. So you've been successful. Hopefully everybody sees how impressive a person and business person you are. You must have made mistakes along the way. Can you think of a big mistake you've made with money somewhere along your life?
Yes, early in my career, when I was married to my first wife and had young children, and we were always trying to keep up with the Joneses. I remember taking a loan for a TV. I needed that 36-inch TV, and I had to take a bank loan and pay it out over 12 months. And it was a mistake. And I was a slave to the interest. We had credit cards and we had debt, and we lived for today and didn't worry about tomorrow. And I've learned that was wrong. And then we worked hard to pay off all the debts and only spend what we had. And I don't like to borrow money.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I share that. It's one of the many common values and philosophies we have. I agree with you. And I think, Americans, recklessness with debt or just, lack of carefulness with debt. Automatically, debt isn't bad. I've used debt successfully. You have too. But it's amazing to me how just comfortable people are with debt. They don't even give it a second thought. They don't realize the seriousness of it. I think it's a shame.
Right. And again, there is good debt.
Yeah.
I was actively paying off my mortgage and wanted to get it down and out of the way. And it's a 2.5% mortgage, and I stopped prepaying it about a year and a half ago, because why pay off a 2.5% mortgage when I can take that same money and zero risk, put it in a T-bill at 5.5?
Yeah. Yeah. Or a CD. Sure. No, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And if it ever turns, I'll just take all that money and pay it down. But
Yeah.
2.5% mortgage, I'll keep that as long as possible.
There you go. And final question. You're good with money. You've already given some examples of how you've built wealth, putting some money away for your kids and whatnot, or grandkids, I should say. What's something you splurge on? Now, listeners, I know what the answer is going to be. I just want to hear Marshall talk about it. So you're good with money, but what is something you splurge on?
I am passionate about boating. And there is no bill that's too big for my boat, and what toys I can get, and it's my passion. It's what I do. I live here in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm on the ocean, and I love to take the boat and end up in the Bahamas or wherever. And I remember my wife. I purchased a new boat 5 years ago, and the day I brought it home, she caught me online that night searching for the next one. She goes, "The ink's not dry. Why are you shopping for the boat?" I said, "Well, I get one every 2 to 3 years, and I got to research it. I'm starting."
There you go. That is definitely a splurge.
They keep getting bigger and bigger, but I keep it under control. I'm not doing things I can't do, and that's my passion. And some guys join country clubs and spend thousands and thousands of dollars in golf, and I don't golf, but I could float forever.
There you go. Very good. Well, I appreciate you joining me on today's show. Of course, I always say appreciate your partnership and your friendship. So I hope you have a great rest of the day. Listeners, I'll be back with you on the next episode of the Simply Financial Podcast very soon. In the meanwhile, you could check out the work that we do in our financial planning practice. You could go to elliottwealth.com. There's information about the work we do. And you could even sign up for a complimentary consultation. If you've listened to this and you're not a client, you'd like to talk to us, you could check that out. And again, I'll be back with you very soon for the next episode. Thanks for listening today.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of Osaic Wealth, Inc., and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of information provided at these websites. Nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues, or any consequences arising out of your access to or your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, You are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management Services, LLC, not affiliated with Osaic Wealth, Inc.